is High Queen Khalida any good in patch 5.2? Khalida was the focus of my very first Immortal Empire videos, but they're old and belong in the tomb now. I have very fond memories of playing her, but her neighborhood has only gotten tougher, and she hasn't had any radical reworks, to the point many YouTubers find her to be the weakest of the faction, a faction they think is weak anyway. Well, maybe she is and maybe she isn't, but she's special, and I want you to have fun playing her if that is your choice. And remember, she bites. Recruited by Campaign Select, Khalida arrives on an Ultra scale with 5,323 health. She has 55 armor, notably lower than, let's say, Cetra. No shield, 15% missile resistance as standard, minus 15% fire resistance as in the standard weakness among Tomb Kings. The units. Leadership 80, which is pretty high, speed 46, which is markedly higher than usual, charge speed 54. Melee attack begins at 65 with an attack interval of 3.7, meaning she has less downtime than normal, and that attack figure is high enough she is considered a duelist. Her melee attacks inflict poison. Expect to hear about poison a lot in this video. Splash target size is medium, so normal infantry and normal human unit cavalry, with a max targets actually damaged of 6, regardless of how many she disrupts. 6 is hardly bad, but remember, against characters, there will be no splash, it will all go toward the character being hit. Melee defense starts at 60, which is remarkably high for a starting figure. Weapon strength comes at 450, and here we see an issue. This is split between base 270 and armor piercing 180, so while it is a split still healthy and generous toward her, it is still tilted markedly toward the base damage. This means she's a lot better at crushing an elven mage than a vampire lord with a full suit of armor. Charge bonus on foot is 70, and mass is 550. I tell you, when I first started playing her, I didn't appreciate how bonkers 70 is, and therefore however good she is at straight melee, leaving her in it without trying to cycle charge, even on foot, is wasting her power. 3 times per battle she can use Venom Wave, and while I'll put up the stats, the gist is that this is an escape from pitched melee and a way to distribute more poison around her. You can use it early on as a way to amplify damage on chaff, yes, and you should. Just it's definitely more in the style of an escape if things are looking grim dark. Surely this cannot be all. No, it is not. Even right out of the tomb, Khalida brings Blessing of Asaph, a 35-meter bubble that grants allies in range plus 15% base and armor-piercing missile damage, and plus 15 reload skill. People have debated how much of an assist reload skill is math-wise, but bottom line, it makes you feel like you're using an old ranged unit, Rate of Fire from Warhammer 2 again. Others have melee goon squads, she has ranged goon squads. Even on foot, Khalida is a siege attacker, is of course undead, causes fear, can hide in forest, and has My Will Be Done for plus 5 melee attack and melee defense for allies in a 35-meter bubble, and can crumble and disintegrate when losing. On a skeleton chariot, which we should consider a transitional stage, health rises to 6,195, armor is 80, speed 74, charge speed 103, melee attack plunges to 35 and inflicts poison again, attack interval of 4, splash target size rises to very large to distribute damage, but max target damage is a fairly narrow 4. Collision attacks will apply in a charging animation, so fun from the whole chariot. Melee defense likewise plunges to 26, melee strength becomes 350, split between base 230 and armor piercing 120. Bonus versus infantry a mighty 28. Now that 28 is pretty nuts, but basically a lot of your defensive capability was traded in for this sweet ride. Except in the sense that speed is life. It is more armored. Charge bonus is 90 and that's default, no buffs, and mass is 1100. So aside from the poison, this is basically what you'd expect from a Tomb Prince on a chariot, but with 10 less charge bonus default, less health, and ever so slightly less attack. Finally, on her trademark Necro Serpent, Khalida's final evolution leaves her at 5,943 health, or slightly less than the chariot, armor 110, speed 66 default, charge speed 100. Melee attack once again shoots back up to 65 with poison attacks, attack interval of 4, unlike the cavalry units, so splash target size is medium again and max targets damaged is 6 again. Melee defense has risen back to 60 default. Weapon strength is 450, split between, and this is different. Base 135 and armor piercing 315. So she becomes an armor piercing monster, mostly literally but also figuratively. Charge bonus is 70 as in identical to on foot, and mass is 1300. In the old days, there were animation issues with Khalida that made it harder to damage her and harder for her to damage others in melee combat on the Serpent, but it still got the job done. With the changes to attacking fleeing units, that might help too. We'll see through the demo combats how it works in the current era. What don't you see? Any spellcasting whatsoever. Khalida is the only legendary lord present with zero talent in magic, completely reliant on leash priests for that. We'll come back to this later. As a faction leader, the warrior queen of Liberas has diplomatic relations plus 10 with all factions, which is more of a late game help because early on basically everybody close by wants your stuff and doesn't easily want to be on your side. Though they may be receptive to trading settlements, as in you giving them ones. Research rate plus 15%, which helps make up for the miserable starting territory, restraining your research rate boosting from settlements. Control plus 4 for all provinces right off the bat, and ammunition plus 20% for all armies, the entire faction. This will have a massive impact on your playstyle possibilities. At any rate, she was an army ranged specialist long before Miao Ying was a thing. As a general, the beloved of Asaph grants attrition minus 50% from all sources to her army alone, corruption minus 3 over in turn for local province, and grants all units in her army poison with their attacks, including ranged attacks, full time. So basically you have an edge against factions and units not resisting poison, although things like red-crested skinks do resist poison these days, so be aware of that. Poison, I remind, is a 15% debuff to enemies' melee and ranged attacks, and also a 15% debuff to their movement speed, and I remind because it will be cumulative with other sources of slowdown. So, blue line, which I don't need to cover since I did that in my huge Cetra video. Since Khalida doesn't have a magic line, you may spend more time in this one. So, red line, which I've also covered, and for the most part, it's unit by unit. So I'll leave this for the unit-focused videos mostly, or the Cetra video if you want more information about the resurrect mechanic. So, yellow line. Actually, there are some differences, so we gotta look at this. Conqueror was replaced by Graceful Warrior, adding plus 12% speed and plus 10 melee defense at 2 pips. And this is a wonderful and marvelous boost for Khalida herself. It's a big quality of life deal for her early on. Not taking it makes me sad, but I often prioritize redline boost first to boost her crucial units such as skeleton archers and skeleton horse archers. The rest is actually all the same. But early on, when she favors base damage, she personally benefits more from Tomb Strike and Desert Strike than an armor-piercing guy like Cetra, aside from the obvious benefits of causing terror and the fat bonus to melee attack. But no, the damage is a lot more meaningful against relevant targets as Khalida. And if you're on the Serpent, then you probably care more about connecting and doing armor-piercing regardless. The top line selections are the same as Cetra. Embalmed in Elixir is very helpful for nearly erasing the initial flame weakness. I say initial for good reason. Ancient Tyrant, Ceremonial Bandages, Returned in Madness, they're all useful, you will want them at some point. For her very personal line. Well, before we get to that, her rank 10 blessing unlock, Asaph the Goddess of Magic and Vengeance, which is funny, her not being a caster lord. Anyway, ambush success chance plus 15%, that's almost on par with Kroq-Gar's basic out of the gate one. Winds of Magic Reserve plus 15, and Missile Strength plus 12% for Skeleton Archers and Sepulchral Stalkers. What's not here? Ushabti with Great Bows. Anyway, Khalida is definitely formidable with archers, but this is a generic Lord Blessing too. Now, True Blessing of Asaph kicks off her True line, and this upgrades and replaces her old buff Bubble, now granting plus 20% missile damage, both base and armor piercing, and plus 25 reload skill, so stuff reloads even faster. And yes, this is cumulative with magic, unless you're hitting a cap. At 1 pip, Purified reduces attrition from all sources, including Chaos Corruption, by 25%. Well, you remember she was already reducing those by 50%? Now it's more. The second pip grants Khalida old-fashioned regeneration with old-fashioned fire weakness. so she will constantly be recovering health unless literally on fire, which makes fighting Skarbrand something of a try-hard challenge. But otherwise, yeah, you can get away with a lot in this game on the basis of healing while out of the fight and then charging back in. Just keep in mind that this is ipso facto regeneration and therefore cannot be stacked with craftable regeneration items, which is probably for the best, or Kairos would burn her like dry tinder. And just to mention, this means that you can get into an ambush stance with an army that's allied to you in a camp stance in Chaos Corruption territory. Khalida will take token attrition damage, and the other army will take no damage. And then if somebody says, oh, that's one army, I can take that. Then they come in and go right into your Khalida ambush. Ah ha 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 ha. You can probably auto-resolve most of those and just win. Liberas's best grants recruit rank +3 for skeleton archer units. I think that's recruit rank for under her only. And which is the sort of thing I think of when I say that unit feature lords such as this. These are fallback positions to get nearly instantly back into the fight. Nonetheless, ammunition plus 25% for skeleton archers for all armies is kind of interesting. You just have to work to get them expending the ammo enough to be worth it. But that's a playstyle issue. Legions of the Asp Goddess is interesting. You know that Legionary Barrage thing, which is a kind of Vampire Coast-like bombardment ability that you get when you build city walls on a major settlement? Khalida can not only use that herself with this one pip, and that's with its normal 3 uses per battle, but can grant its use to other lords within the local province if Skarbrand Lightning that's a very specific example, if other battles take place without her. The damage is not super high, but it's also fully armor-piercing. Embodiment of Asaph grants melee attack +5 for Sepulchral Stalkers and Necropolis Knights, and grants melee defense +5 for the same in Khalida's personal army. So I just want to focus on this for a second. Even though she's pegged as the Archer Lord, this is in practice an enormous boost to both units, which are desperate for every point of attack and defense they can get. In other words, Khalida's fortunes go forward and are married to the cavalry building. Keep this in mind because she's no different than an average lord for chariots, and can't get Petra the Great Father herself, but her stalkers already spit 12% harder. Finally, Warrior Queen is quietly amazing, granting Khalida herself 10% physical resistance. Note that this didn't really pop up until now except for Return in Madness. And Frenzy, which means a +10 melee attack bonus for as long as her leadership isn't crumbling along with her body, +10% weapon strength, and +10% charge bonus. The different sources of charge bonus really start adding up and multiplying. Even just this, with no increases in the yellow line whatsoever, make her a powerful combatant. This isn't complete without going into her legendary item, and besides its old benefits, the rework to homing missiles looms large. The Venom Staff provides corruption -5 for local province, enables magical attacks. Note that Khalida did not get that to start with. Armor-piercing melee damage +40, whether she's on foot, on chariot, or on serpent, and then the 4 times per battle, 30-second cooldown Venom Staff ability, and that's a fairly short cooldown, launching a poisoned pair of explosive projectiles as a 200-meter artillery-like bombardment, 100 direct damage that's fully armor-piercing, is flaming and magical attack, and a 61 explosion damage in a 7-meter radius, that's 100% armor-piercing and magical attack. Great. This is to say, infantry will hurt from it. It's not like Khalida had any other way of distance attack, so this is a wonderful little bonus. So how do we use Khalida? This is the 6th revision of this part of the script. It's taken a while, and what relates to reload skill from Blessing of Asaph and its True Blessing upgrade are in my Total Warhammer video about this, and also the comments. It's been pointed out that Khalida, even on foot, has a lunging attack animation that is unusual. Basically, out in the open, unobstructed by infantry blobs, she has good charging animations, a good deal better than the melee animations people malign as being caster lord animations due to having a staff, and venom wave effects. If you have a situation where she actually has a clean shot on a character, her charges are by far the best use of her talents. I'd strongly recommend putting the targets back to your Shopti Greatbow unit as well. The problem in practice is her damage profile. Thoric, armored. Kroq-Gar, armored, and it only gets worse when he gets mounts. Queek, armored. Skarbrand, armored with physical resistance. The most generic lords of these factions tend to be high armor too. Khalida may be your best option to roadblock these lords in given situations, but you aren't expecting her to shine, and building her yellow line early is depriving you of help for your archers and cavalry, which hurts you elsewhere. Though, I've done it, in the long run, you just deal either way. On a chariot, she gains the ability to suddenly waste the ammo of enemy artillery. She can also act as a field commander for a mobile element, including archer chariots and horse archer chariots, but you have to have enough of them to make it worthwhile. While interesting, it also savages her stats for pitched combat in melee, which is a problem when that's a strength of hers naturally. So when you get down to it, it all comes down to getting to rank 14 and getting her on that Necro Serpent, where she regains all her foot melee stats, has even better animations, not just for avoiding damage in some cases, but for sudden and powerful lunges. Moreover, her damage is now armor piercing. Even if you put nothing in her yellow line, she suddenly becomes much more powerful. A similar transformation happens in campaign in general. I've done a lot of experimenting to see if my old findings were right, and it's like this. The AI director will put you at war with somebody when you are doing well. Thork is going to go to war with you with almost 2 full armies, Fatten's ungrudged seller mechanics, if you do not trade him a settlement, and get even just a non-aggression pact, and then he'll like you. But he won't lift one finger to stop Skarbrand from entering through his territory. And you also have to jump on that really fast early in campaign, or he will declare war. Queek sure won't care either, and Skarbrand will force march with a very killable army onto your doorstep at the worst possible time without you having much for a warning. So playing defensively is a choice. And sometimes Thork and Skarbrand will double team a small settlement even when they're not allies because they are just both at war with you. It happens. Wait until they separate. Well, in such situations, you're playing keep away with Lamia and trying to stop enemies from taking it at all costs. At least, you're trying to. Since you're so exposed, despite the mountains, ultimately, your economy, your need for canopic jars, and so on, you need to go wide. But your geography works against that. In fact, the easiest place to expand, with the fewest travel difficulties for you, is south into Kroq-Gar's jungles and fighting him personally. Now, I will say, Khalida has mountain-favorable climate, so when she takes Thork's territory, when she takes Queek's territory, she can keep it more easily than Setron. So that's an issue, but you still don't have any mechanics for traveling past those mountains. You cannot use the underways yourself, so you've got to balance those two things. Either way, yes, you can push it and fight enemies early, you can buy some time to get your second army online, but your real objective, above all others, is to get Lamia to tier 3, to get a tier 3 cavalry building up and running, and if you don't have money, just war and fight. You can recover from losses for free, but you need that gold. And once you get that building, 1 unit of Necropolis Knights and 2 Sepulchral Stalkers join Khalida's cause. In spite of the fact you have to choose to make your front line or your archer corps thinner as a result, your power is stupidly strong. Stalkers are already good. The moment you put Khalida with them to jack up their individual shot power and their reload reduction time, they become insane. You don't even need to invest in their red line for the melee skills if you'd rather put that into cavalry for the Necropolis Knights until really late game. Khalida is the one who augments their spits to make them overpowered enemy crushers. And then once you get the +5 to melee attack and defense for both them and the Necropolis Knights, you're pretty covered anyway. And both of them dramatically help solve your criminally underweighted armor-piercing capability. So if you don't want to fight dwarfs early, because you can, exploiting their lack of mobility on the strength of your artillery advantage, unless you lost them and then that's really painful, then you can piece with Thork early before he's taken an active dislike to you, but you have to pass. Either way, Khalida needs fights and needs levels, so even a lot of issues can be recovered from. It's just, when you get the Stalkers and Knights, she gets legitimately powerful and it only gets better from there. Venom Staff is a good and handy tool that turns her into a harasser part-time, but the secret of Khalida is that she's a hybrid support duelist. As in, she goes from making your ranged units much more powerful to being a single target crusher. I mean, she's probably better at fighting regular infantry early on than lords, because most of them are armored. And dark forces save any Strigoi or Necromancer who offends thee. But on that serpent, she can at least reach out and hurt anything on the ground. Anything. And then most of the time, she can get right back out, and the instant she's within 35 meters, everything around her shoots faster and harder and fights in melee stronger if that needs to happen. There's a lot of flexibility in the middle. But ultimately, Khalida's blessing, buffing magic reserves, but with her unable to use the magic herself. This means she probably wants a couple of Lich Bleeds with her personally, offering different perspectives to solve your problems. Lore of Light brings obvious advantages for the nets. A minimum of 1 will still give you a lot, but I'm saying 2. And if you have Caskets of Souls to help raise the reserves, and ideally a Hyro Titan to make them even stronger, and maybe the other Trickster's Shard on somebody in melee situations, you have ways to use magic. But if I'm going to give more advice, it's that you need to remember that however much you want Lamia at rank 5 and to never fall, the special building is pretty token. It's valuable to you, but you can get a lot done without it as long as you have other major settlements to work from. Ultimately, everything should be defense in depth, building multiple sources of valuable units, and having lots of things to throw at your enemy. I will say that even for Khalida, I have found those basic, unupgraded skeleton chariots still really good at killing lots of infantry, though they'll be more fragile in her hands than Setras. And bone giants are just so good in all phases of combat, she can exploit their presence too. And, late game, an Ushabti Great Bow Sniper Goon Squad is an amazing thing too. These are options, but having too little chaff can be its own problem, and skeleton archers, while they are stronger under her than anyone else, are only stronger than anyone else, if she's personally present. And barring that, they're still fragile. They are reliant on volume of fire and mass, and most opponents are things that they wear down rather than initiate systematic destruction of. If you want that, you need magical bombardment at the right time, or you need some kind of melee annihilation at the right time, which is basically what your Necropolis Knights are for. But a War Kitty or a Necro Sphinx can help out a lot too. It's probably too low tier for most people to want. Ushabti are brutal too. It's just that you probably want a Necrotect married to them for the best results. Finally, I just want to quickly point out that the Herald providing hawkish precision is an extremely valuable addition to your forces when you get Ushabti or Bone Giant stacks running. Early on, it's not absolutely required in any way, and won't help your caskets or catapults, but in the long run, it's a big deal. It doesn't affect stalkers. Khalida is ultimately a sandstorm. She wears you down from long range, medium range, then at a shorter range, and then once you get into the melee grind, at some point the fangs really come out, and the melee destruction against weakened, demoralized opponents begins. Don't discount poison in this. It's one of the reasons that her early game army hangs around against a lot of opponents more than it should. And sometimes you just wait for enough chaff to die, and the Ushabti come out and bail you out from behind the enemy. It's the combination of everything that makes this shine. Khalida is hard early, yes. If you don't make peace with anyone early, it can be very dicey, and if you do, it can make life harder for yourself in other ways later on, but ultimately you just have to fight and win. The reason I come back to going south after the jungles isn't because other options are not viable, it's because fighting the mountains is a bit tough on old bones. Mountains slow you down and deny you battles you have a good shot of winning. Instead, seek battles you can afford to fight. Sometimes this means leaving a force to keep Lamia safe while doing these things on the side. Sometimes it means abandoning the home province and pushing so hard and earning so many canopic jars that you can rebuild when you loop back north. And that is if someone actually took it from you. There's no need to be trapped for long. There are units and even armies you can afford to lose. Use them to put the enemy into situations where it loses what it can't afford to. Also, with Khalida's control buffs, she has very little to worry about for rebellions, so it's almost always enemy action that gets you. Keep that in the back of your mind. Asaph is the goddess of magic and vengeance, so when you strike, strike swift, strike hard, and purify the land. Take care, and have fun showing that it's not just the boys who get to conquer the world.